Welcome to another episode of Founder Unfiltered. I'm Bradley Jacobs. I'm your host, the founder and CEO of Mylance. Founder Unfiltered is the show about the psychological side of building, the part that doesn't make the highlight reel. Today's guest has spent nearly 30 years helping founders and consultants do one of the hardest things in business, get out of their own heads. He's the founder of the Models Method and creator of the Genius Model, a system for turning complex expertise into visual frameworks that actually close deals. His work is used in 30 countries across industries, ranging from defense to one-on-one coaching. What I find most interesting about Simon is that his entire business is built on the belief that thinking is the most undervalued skill in business, and that most founders are sitting on more insight than they'll ever know what to do with. Simon Bowen, welcome to Founder Unfiltered.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you get into this work? I'm always curious how people started with what they're doing now.
I get asked that a lot, and I've thought about it a lot. It's pretty eclectic. I grew up in very small farming communities in Western Australia. And when I say small, the towns were 400 people and 900 people, So my father's one of 10, so I've got 45 first cousins and all on farms. If we were going from one farm to an uncle's farm or something and we weren't sure exactly how to get there, one of my uncles or my father would grab a stick and draw a map in the ground and say, well, you got to go through the top paddock, make sure you shut that gate, and you then go across the creek and have you got it? And I'd go, yep. And then he'd kick the map away in the dirt. And I remember thinking putting on a piece of paper would have been handy. And then my early working life was in electrics and electronics. And before I thought I would teach high school students until that convinced me that teaching 15 to 17-year-old boys physics and chemistry is not, that's a test. That tells you whether you can teach for the next 40 years, right? And I knew I didn't have the vocational fortitude to do that. But all of that work, growing up in a time when every idea, someone has an idea or a concept in their head, and then it turns into something in reality over here. But it is almost always, the metaphysics of it is, it's almost always a drawing first in the space between. And so, everything that you and I are using at the moment, the desks, the computers and everything else, are unbelievable in reality, right? Think about the technology we're using. It's ridiculous. But it was an idea in someone's head first, and then it became a circuit diagram. I was designing electronic components in my early career, and you've got an idea of what you want to build, and then you have the component. But in between is a circuit diagram that you have to draw first. And you test if it will work by tracing your way through the circuit diagram as if it was an electrical current, right? And if it's going to hit something and short out, or it's not going to make it through, then you fix the circuit diagram. And so I sort of ended up in this world where, I ended up being an executive manager for a large Australian company for the West Australian division. All of my professional life has been in the business of taking complex conceptual ideas and either trying to make them, actually build them, or bring them to market. And the gap between was always some sort of visual representation, usually a drawing on paper or CAD or something like that everyone can rally around. Imagine going to an architect and saying, to a builder saying, I've got a great idea in my head for a house. Could you build it for me? The builder would say, you mad? I need architectural drawings, right? I spent, 25 plus years doing large scale projects. The government would say, we're putting 200 people in the room together who don't like each other, but they're unified in their hatred for us as government. And there's a policy we need to get them all to agree to. You've got them for 2 hours in the room. Can you get them to agree? And I built a reputation for being able to do that sort of work. We're going to build a $1.4 billion stadium. Can you engage with all the stakeholders and get them to agree on what they want in a stadium? And that stadium is here in Perth, and it won the world's best stadium the year it was built. The Department of Defence would say, we're getting the Army, Navy and Air Force together who hate each other, and we're bringing the civilian contractors in who will look after food and accommodation on bases. And we need them to talk about how they're going to deploy into countries like Afghanistan and others, right? Can you go around all the military bases in the country? We're going to bring them all together and get them all to agree. And, it's a human process, not a technical process. But the fact is, if you want someone to agree to something, everyone talks about the 80-20 rule, and, only do the 20% that delivers the 80% of the result, right? So if this is the result and this is effort, if you map the 80-20 rule on a graph, it looks like this. That's what the Pareto principle looks like. So 20% of the effort gives you, the 80% of the result. That's true. Unless it's the Olympic Games. My nephew is a 2-time Paralympian. If you want to go to the Olympic Games, you've got to do 4 years of prep just to get there in order to try and win the medal. So it is true, the last 20% gets the medal, but it's the 80% that prepares you. And so when someone says only do the 20% that gets you 80% of the results, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the Pareto principle. You have to do the 20% that prepares you to take advantage of the 80%. And this place is called the 3/4 mark, which is sort of magical. Most people fall out of the 42-kilometer marathon at about 32K, the 3/4 mark, or the 88K comrades in South Africa at 62K, the 3/4 mark. A lot of business owners do all the work, all the prep, and then get disaffected and disappointed and psychologically disconnected and worn out and exhausted. Right at this point, they go, I'm out of here. And they sell the business for pennies to somebody else who takes all of that prep that's been put in with new energy, and the business flies, right? Because there's an injection of energy in here. Well, I figured out if you've got 200 people in the room who don't like each other that much, but you're trying to resolve a complex issue, you just have to get them to the 3/4 mark in enough shape to allow you to put an injection of energy into the room to get them to get the last bit done. And it turns out, I just figured out the best place to get them to at that 3/4 mark is have them frustrated. Have them feel like they've just wasted 90 minutes. Like the meeting's 2 hours, get them to feel like they've just wasted 90 minutes, but keep them in the problem, right? And it's not hard to frustrate 200 people. You just listen to everybody equally. Like every time someone says, oh, we'll capture that on the flip chart, we'll capture that. Everybody wants to be heard louder than everybody else. And if you listen to everyone equally and really manage a fair room, people get frustrated by that, right? And then at the 3/4 mark, if I went to a whiteboard and said, you know what, I think I can draw this, everyone sits up. Well, that was unusual. What do you mean you think you can draw this? When you draw people in. When you fill the space between concept and reality with a drawing, you draw people in. And I would go to the whiteboard and I would start building a visual model with them and get them to help me build the model. And 30 minutes later, they're kind of going, that's actually the answer. That's incredible, right? And that was my secret for 25 years, facilitating big conversations, right? I would just be in this cycle constantly of frustrate them, tell them I think I can draw this, and then build a model collectively out of the room. And it's taken me on the most amazing journey of incredibly rich opportunities to have big conversations. We're going to build a $2 billion mine construction. Can you help facilitate the project? Where, we want to reduce the pharmaceutical spend in hospitals by $300 million. Could you facilitate that? These are just big thinking projects. And then at the same time, a founder owner that says, I started my business 5 years ago and I can't get the market to understand what I do. Could you help me with that? Well, of course we can. We're going to build a model. You're not filling the space between concept and reality with anything that people can see. And that's actually a really, really important point. So long answer to a short question, but the journey is eclectic. And Bradley, it's a really important question because I came across this concept of, or thought of this idea of company genius. What is the genius of a company? Your real product in any business, we all do two things. Every company does two things. The first thing it does that the customer wants is make me safe. People want to be made safe. Make me safe, right? And then the second thing everybody wants is help me win. People don't necessarily want to say it out loud, but everybody wants to win. Nobody wants an average result. I want a better result than most people get, right? So make me safe and help me win. Every business is doing those two things. The deep and profound thinking behind how you do that, your company genius, is the real product. Because people want to attach themselves to someone who demonstrates completeness of thinking, not uniqueness. Uniqueness is, hey, we've got a unique solution. 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 And the customer's going, well, they all sound credible and I can't choose, so I won't do anything because I don't want to make a mistake. And we live in a sea of uniqueness today. And it's getting worse with AI because everyone jumps into AI and AI puts together some cool sounding words and the person goes, oh, that sounds unique. I'll put that out in my marketing. That is not depth of thinking. That's laziness, right? I've let AI define. Think about this for a minute. I've gone to a tool, an LLM. I've told it what I do and I've asked it to tell me how to express that to the marketplace. And it comes up with something that sounds cool. And it only sounds cool because you've not heard it before. But it has to have been said before for the LLM to come up with it. It's just that you've not heard it before. And the LLM might have better vocabulary than you. And so you go, that sounds cool, unique. I'm going to say that. That's not depth of thinking. That's laziness of thinking. You've made the headline your genius. And what the market wants, the market doesn't want you're unique, you're unique, you're unique, you're unique. The market wants someone who demonstrates completeness of thinking. I have thought this through so deeply. I've made more sense of this than anyone else you've met. Our thinking is our product. And so even for the founder who says, I do this thing and I just can't get the market to understand what I'm doing, that's not a quality or value problem. That's a communication problem. And the problem often is people are trying to sell the product, not their depth of thinking. And so what makes the difference in company genius is actually the perspective of the founder or the perspective of the deepest thinkers of the organization. That's what makes company genius. And so when you said, what's my story? I wouldn't be doing what I did today without that story, right? Because the story gives me my lens of original perspective. It allows me to curate the other 80% of the stuff. Like I didn't invent models, but I use them differently. I certainly didn't design the iPad or technology, but I use it differently, right? I didn't invent the idea of drawing, but I use it differently. We design choreography for how you walk through a model. I didn't invent choreography. Our choreography is based on stage magic and comedy. I didn't invent that, but I use it differently because of that lens of original perspective. So, the founder's story, even if the founder is no longer in the business, the founder's story is critical to most companies in them being able to demonstrate their company genius to a marketplace that allows people to go, you have completeness of thinking. You and I have never heard anyone say, oh, look, I don't want to buy someone. I'm happy to buy from someone who doesn't have a complete view of the picture. No one ever said that. So we all actually just want to buy from the person who has the most complete view of the picture. It makes most sense. So long answer to a short question, but it's an important question, really important question for the founder.
So let's talk about what the founder who's listening to this and says, okay, that all makes sense. Really cool, really interesting. I want my completeness of thinking, my founder genius to come through everything I do. I want it to come through my sales, my marketing, my product, my customer support, everything. How do I tangibly do that? How do I bring that forward with everything in my company?
I've got to cover two things to answer that really well for people. I want to show people what the completeness of thinking is. And then I need to touch on organizational design a little bit, which is, a world I spent much of my working life in. So the founder brings a solution to the marketplace. They've had this idea. And 20% of that comes from their created genius. So their original lens of perspective. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say someone's got a laundromat. It seems pretty basic, right? There's machines, you put coins in, you wash your stuff. So let's say that the owner decides they're going to start a laundromat, but that owner grew up in a poor family, and there was never a lot of money in the house. But what his or her mother always did was manage to put some food on the table and wash all the clothes and the linen every single week. They always had clean clothes. They always had fresh linen. The house was always tidy. They never had a lot of money, but there was food on the table, the house was tidy, and the linen and the clothes were fresh. And so that founder grew up understanding the importance of taking a little bit of pride in your appearance and hygiene and all of that sort of thing. Anyway, the founder, worked hard, didn't want to stay in poverty, and so eventually, went off and found a career and started doing well, and then thought, I want to get into business, but I don't want a business that's going to consume me. And during that time, he's, I was a student and everything else, still living on breadcrumbs, but he wants to keep his clothes clean. And so he goes to the laundromat. And when he goes to the laundromat, he's feeding coins into the machine and he's sitting there waiting for his laundry to be done. And so are the other people sitting and waiting for the laundry to be done. And of course, they're the same people usually each week at that time. And so they start chatting and they get to know each other. And he thinks, well, while we're here, we may as well get some cheese and cookies and cheese and crackers and, sit and chat. And so this little group of people that go to the laundromat every week on a Saturday, none of them want to. It's not how they want to use their Saturday morning, but it becomes a little social group. And at the same time, he's at business, he's studying business and he's learning the importance of bringing a product to market that you can scale, that you could make multiple of, right? Can't depend on just him. Anyway, eventually he thinks, I want to buy laundromats because they're pretty simple. There's machines, there's no real staff. And so 80% of what he's going to do is what everybody else has. And so he's going to curate what he needs for laundromats. So what's the best machine to have in a laundromat? What's the most reliable machine? How do we make the place function in the most way possible? But his lens of perspective, his story has told him, do you want a laundromat should be a social event because people spend a lot of time there. They shouldn't just sit around doing nothing. The place should be clean and tidy because they're sitting there spending a lot of time. What if somebody else wanted to do what I did and have cheese and crackers for everybody each time? So they're going, we better have a bench that's nice and tidy. I hated feeding coins into those machines. Can't we find a way for them to pay that doesn't require them to have to find the coins? And people get there all the time and they're wrestling with their powder and stuff. We could solve that problem. And so 80% of what he's doing is what everybody else has done, but his 20% lens of perspective, the perspective changes the 80%. And so what he does, the critical piece is this bit in the middle, he integrates all of that together into a solution. Create, curate, and integrate. That's company genius. The laundromat is not his secret. It's his thinking behind it that is the secret. And he can scale that all over the country. And all of a sudden, he's redefined laundromats, right? That's true for every founder. And what a lot of people do, and this speaks to imposter syndrome, everybody's curating the 80%. It's folly to think that we've all invented something so unique that nobody else thought of any of it, that 100% of it is our original thinking, right? But because people are curating existing things, they don't feel like they should talk about it, and imposter syndrome kicks in. 80% of what I'm doing is what other people do. Of course. That would demonstrate completeness of thinking. You've gone out into the market and found the best in breed. That's a good thing, but it's how you view it that's made all the difference. So stop worrying about the fact that 80% of what you do is what other people do. It's the 20% that is based on your story that created your lens of original perspective that allows you to look at that 80% differently. So then what happens is a company gets formed for a purpose. This is organizational design. And I want to give people a tool to take away about this. Remind me to do that before we finish, that they could use to sell with, right? A company starts for a purpose, commercial, want to make money. And in the ideal world, it would serve some sort of cause as well. If it just exists for a cause, that's a charity. The sustaining piece is it can make money. So you could just have a laundromat, pump coins into a machine, and it will make money. Or you could create a laundromat knowing that people are going to spend a lot of time there and cause the laundromat to be a highlight of their week, not a low light of their week, right? Serve a cause. And then it's measured by the impact it has in the marketplace. And we have vision and mission in here and everything else. This is filtered through 3 lenses. Down one path are the mechanics of your organization. And the mechanics is how you organize yourself. And there's a lot of models for how companies can organize. This is the McKinsey 7S model for organizational design, a really well understood organizational design model. How you organize, so your policies, your procedures, your SOPs, your structure, workflows, et cetera, all of that creates consistency. And consistency says to the customer, we can rely upon them. So consistency delivers the user experience. That company is consistent. Every time we ask them for something, we get it. Every time they promise something, they do it. They're reliable. We can rely upon them. The other channel is, what is the magic of your organization? The magic of your organization is your people, so we do that through culture. I have a culture model with values in the middle. And culture is the pathway to organizational character. Culture is not the end outcome. Culture's the feature, character's the benefit. So when you have a great culture, you have an organization of character. Customer says, these people show up. And because that organization has character, we can trust them. We can rely on them and we can trust them. 2 really big things, right? But the problem is that the founder's idea still isn't present yet. Who the founder is as a human being can show up through the character. How well organized the founder is, or the people they've hired to be organized, can show up through the mechanics, the consistency. But the founder brought something to market, and I call that the model of thinking. And so I built a single visual model that I call the genius model that allows a company to describe what it does in 7 to 10 minutes, that this is the genius we bring to the market, our core capability, and our core capability is our thinking, and therefore you can believe us. Now, we live in a believability crisis. I know that to be true because I'm a mad, keen dog lover, right? And I get these video feeds all the time of a toddler about to fall down the steps and the dog walks in front of it and herds it back to the door. And I go, what a good boy. And then I go to the comments and someone goes, oh, it's AI, you idiot, right? But it was so real, right? We don't know what to believe anymore. We live in a believability crisis. But when people can see your thinking, I want to say that again, when people can see your thinking, but 83% of the signals we take from the world around us come in through the optic nerve. 52% of the brain's reflex response is attached directly to the optic nerve. An animal hears a noise and goes on alert, but it only fights or runs when it sees the danger. So when people can see your thinking, because your thinking is the real product, you become believable. Right. And you can, if you show them your thinking in an organized way, in an integrated, structured way, you show them a visual model that shows them the 20% created, the 80% curated, and the integration of all of it. They go, oh, they're pretty switched on. Think about the language we use. Oh, they're switched on. No one's going to look at the laundromat and go, oh, they're switched on. But they are going to look at the thinking behind the laundromat and go, they're switched on. No one's going to look at a flow diagram of how an advisor of some form walks through the work process with you and go, oh, they're switched on. But when they can see a model of how you think, they go, they're switched on. right? And that brings up a big issue we've got to talk about in a minute. But the market says that that's a company of character. The founder is a good human being. And so they built a company of people who are good human beings. And that's a company of character. And the customer goes, so I can trust them because of the magic of the company. The founder likes things to be organized, and they believe that the customer is entitled to a consistent experience. And so the founder puts the effort into the organizational frameworks and structures that delivers consistency, so the market says we can rely on them. But the founder brought to the table the original thinking that then was built on by the rest of their team that demonstrates real company genius, depth of thinking, and the market says, gee, they're capable, they're switched on. Therefore, we can believe them, we can trust them, believe them, and rely on them. Those three things will make you the sale, right? And here's a really important issue. We've had a decade of saying, start with why, right? Start with purpose. Purpose does not make the sale. Purpose makes you interesting. Like if the customer says, gee, I like that purpose, that makes you interesting, but purpose does not make the sale. You know, Simon, I don't 100% agree with Simon Sinek with the greatest respect. He says people don't buy your what until they know your why. And I think it would be more accurate to say people don't buy what you do until they know that they are the reason why you do it. And there's a difference in those two statements. So the underlying purpose of every business is the customer. It's the only purpose the customer cares about. And so when I know that I am your purpose and I can see your thinking and I know you're pretty switched on and I can believe you and you have character and I can trust you and you have consistency, I can rely on you, I think I want to buy from you. The sale is made in the how, particularly in the complex sale, Bradley, and particularly in advisory and consultancy and things like that. The sale is made in the how. And specifically, I mean in letting people see how you think, right? That's where the sale is made. That's when they go, they're switched on. We need to buy from them. The easiest way to make how you think visible is to build a model and walk through the model in front of people and let them see your thinking in action.
So, and I'm loving where you're taking this because I actually just recorded a solo podcast series on what I believe the world is moving towards with AI, where anybody can make any product. People are launching services right, left, and center. It's never been easier to build any product they want super quickly, super inexpensively. So what differentiates you? And this is what you're talking about. This is exactly what you're talking about of it is you. It is bringing in that 20% of what is your purpose? What is your why? And because I'm going to argue most people's businesses came from something that they overcame, something that they learned, some personal experience that they had, and then they want to go add value to other people. So you don't have to manufacture it. It's there. It's authentic.
Every business that's ever been built started with somebody wrestling with something. Not necessarily always a negative problem, but something, right? It could have been a curiosity that they were wrestling with, but every business started with someone wrestling with something, right? And let's just speak to AI for a minute, and then I want to come back to what is human and what are we probably going to hold on to. You know, we all see, marketing that says, I built a business in 3 hours using AI agents and tools and Claude Cowork and Claude Code. You know, it's doing X thousands of dollars per month, and you can too. The value of your product is directly proportional to the amount of effort you've had to put into it to bring it to market. And so if you built something in 3 hours, it's worth 3 hours of money, right? And so if you built a product in 3 hours, now people would say, well, it depends on the problem that it solves for the customer, right? But if the customer knows you could build that in 3 hours, so could a ton of other people. And therefore, sure, it might solve a problem for me, and that problem could be substantial, but we have a hardwired psychological attachment to you should be paid for the amount of effort you put into this, not the benefit I gain from it. That's how most people think when they're the buyer, right? But then when we become the seller, all of a sudden, we think people should pay us according to the value that they get from it. Now, if you're a really great communicator, you could make that happen. But most people want to buy based on the amount of effort the person's put into it. When we are all buyers, we're kind of the same, right? Because we've had hundreds and hundreds of years of you get paid by the hour. You're paid according to the time you put into it. And people that are working on a salary are still being paid by the hour. So they're measuring themselves according to, I've worked 40 hours a week, I get paid this much money, right? I do this kind of work, but I'm in a band with other people that do that kind of work. And I still work X number of hours and I get paid this much money. And all of a sudden we want people to flip and go, oh yeah, I only put 3 hours into this, but it's amazing. So you should pay me thousands of dollars, right? What the large language models have really done is taken collective human intelligence and created a mechanism to be able to tap into it in a singular way, right? So a great facilitator, a great intuitive facilitator in a room, and this person doesn't exist, but a great intuitive facilitator in the room could do what a large language model does. They could walk into a room of 100 people, and if they could tap into the thought processes of all those 100 people, they could pull out some pretty amazing articulations from the room, if you like. But here's what AI can't do at the moment. AI can't walk into a room full of people and intuitively understand if the nervous systems in the room are dysregulated. AI is never going to walk into a room to solve a problem for a company and then recognize within minutes that the real problem is that everyone in the room hates the CEO. And actually, that's the problem we've got to fix, right? AI can't give someone a hug. AI doesn't have compassion, and AI doesn't have conscience. And the big thing AI is never going to have is accountability. And so when a customer buys something from an AI business, the customer's buying that knowing that there's no accountability. I'm going to be dealing with agents and bots, and they're not accountable. They just want to solve the problem, which means make me go away, right? Do something to cause me to go away. And so there is a place for humans in there somewhere. And so, what the market really wants as a distillation, the market wants to meet someone where they can say, oh, you get it. You really get it. You get this thing. You get it. You get it. You get laundromats. You get it, right? Then they want to meet someone where they can say, and you get me. I have to go to the laundromat, but I want clean clothes, right? And I don't want scum in the machines because I'm coming to the laundromat, so I've got clean linen and clean clothes, but I got to spend time here. I want to make use of that time. And this is the thinking level where they want to go, oh, they make more sense than anyone else I've met, right? Below the line, they want to be able to say, oh, and you've got it. You've got a solution. You've actually got, your laundromats are way better than everybody else's. There's clean bench. There's a fridge in there. Who puts a fridge in a laundromat? But I can come in and I can put my shopping in there and I can bring in some cold drinks and I can put a party on for everybody in the laundromat. And more importantly, you've got me. I'm the most important thing in your business. And this resolves what I call the ache. I'd love people to think about this, and then I want to give a little model that people could use to sell from this. We've been taught decades and decades and decades of PAS, problem, aggravate, solve, as a marketing strategy. Find the customer's problem, aggravate it, and then solve it, and they'll buy from you. But, when a customer can see this whole picture, they go, oh, you get it. You get me. You get my problem, what I'm trying to solve. You get the whole situation, and you get the future that I want to have. You get it all. Therefore, you make more sense than anybody else. Let me do an example, and then I'll explain why this works. I have a cousin who's a non-surgical dermal therapist, and so she treats acne with laser treatment and creams and topical treatments and dietary change, right? And so people come to her and say, and she's been voted the number one non-surgical dermal therapist in Australia for 10 years in a row by her peers. And people come to say, can you treat my acne? She goes, sure. Treating acne is much like an iceberg. It's going to take 5 treatments and they're $365 a treatment. How's that sound? And the person immediately goes, I've seen people online advertise this for $90 a treatment. And she goes, sure. But treating acne is just talking about acne is a shallow conversation. We could stay shallow or we could go deep and talk about what's really going on. What do you want to do? Stay shallow or go deep? And no person ever said, I'm kind of superficial, let's stay shallow, right? They go, no, well, I want to go deep, of course. So immediately below the surface are the results. What we have to make happen, I have a 100% cleanup rate on acne. I'm not changing that number on you. This is going to work. I want to offer you certainty. This is going to happen fast. I want to offer you speed. And I want to give you great skin. I want to give you a perfect result. How's that sound to you? And they go, wow. And she goes, that's right. Sounds fantastic, but wow is our narcotic. When you give someone a wow, you need to give them a bigger hit after that. The really important question is, if those 3 things were to happen for you, what would that mean for you? All of this choreography is very deliberate. What would that mean for you? And at that question, they usually burst into tears. And they say, I'd find a partner. I'd go on a trip of a lifetime. I wouldn't wear a hoodie in summer. And she goes, that's right. That's right. See, I think a wonderful person like you truly deserves skin you love living in. Skin you love. Isn't that what you really want? And they go, oh, is the sound of deep internal realization, right? They go, yeah, that's all I want. And she goes, well, I use all the same equipment as everybody else. I use many of the same topical treatments as everybody else. And I also understand how your nutrition is affecting this, same as everybody else. But it's the fact that I've gone through this myself, and it's the way I use those things that gets me the results that I get. In fact, the equipment manufacturers keep wanting me to tell them how I use their equipment differently to everybody else because of the results I get. Because I don't use the equipment in the sequence that the manufacturers recommend it. And I don't use the topical treatments in the same way that the manufacturers recommend it. And I have some twists on the nutritional program that actually allow you to stick to it, because most people can't stick to the perfect nutritional program that most people want them to follow to get rid of their acne. You're living a life and you have to be able to, go out and eat and everything else. So it's how I do it that makes the difference. What's happened to this price point, Bradley?
Looks just fine.
It's completely irrelevant, right?
Yeah, I'm sure I'll pay for it.
They're saying, what they usually say is, how do I get started? She goes, well, you just give me a credit card. And away we go, right? So what's actually going on here is there are 3 levels of problem. There's the known problem. I have acne. We can talk about that. And that's where problem, aggravate and solve lives, in traditional marketing. It's the problem the customer can articulate, right? Oh, I've got acne. Can you help me with my acne? And it's transactional. It's surface level. The next level down is truly transformational, but these are the results. And this is the hidden problem. So this is the problem that they know they have, but they don't want to talk about it because there's often some regret or shame or something attached to it. Like, my diet is rubbish. I'm eating crap foods. I have a lot of sugar. Of course, my skin is bad because the skin's a reflection of what's going on inside. It's just the biggest organ on the body, right? And I don't take my makeup off at night time before I go to bed. And, or when I work out in the gym and I'm all sweaty, I don't have a shower straight away and clean my skin. So a hidden problem, right? There's stuff I'm doing that's contributing to the known problem. Those two levels the customer knows about. One they're happy to talk about, one they're not happy to talk about. At the base of this is the unknown but deeply felt problem. And what is the unknown but deeply felt problem for people with acne, right? I know that when I walk into a room, it doesn't feel fair, but I know when I walk into a room, people judge me based on the less than 2 millimeters of surface covering my body. The two things that people are going to judge me on when I walk into a room are my teeth and my skin. Or actually the three things: my teeth, my skin, and my hair. Like, it doesn't seem fair, but it is what happens, right? And so first impressions count, all this sort of stuff. And I hate that. I just hate walking into a room because of my acne. It's an ache, and it is the timeless problem that they have. It's a deep ache. Now, the ache could be positive. There's this amazing opportunity I just can't quite grab or hold on to, or it could be a negative problem, acne, right? But the ache is something they can't name, can't even describe, but it's there, sitting underneath. In my world, people say, we need more sales or greater conversion. Great. What's the hidden problem? We suck at selling. We just don't want to talk about that, right? Great. What's the deep ache? I'm just sick of having to prove myself every time I get in front of a customer. Okay. Well, let's solve that problem. Let's make it possible for you to show them how good it all is without any pressure, without any anxiety or nervousness or anything else. And so the ache is this deep feeling at the bottom. And so don't you just want skin you love living in? As soon as you name the ache, everything else that everybody else is saying becomes irrelevant, right? And you get to the bottom of your iceberg, which is the first model that we help unpack for people. And there's deep thinking needed underneath this to get to it, right? Because the ache is the hardest thing to find. I reckon the most important part of the work we do with people when we're building the models is actually finding the ache, because the founder had the ache years ago. Like, when I paid a magician to teach me stage magic, he said, you need to understand you'll never be amazed by a magician again, because you'll know what they're doing. And I went, okay, I can live with that. And it's true. He said, you'll appreciate their skill more, but you'll never be amazed. And I watch stage magic now, and I love it, but I'm never amazed because I know what they're doing. I might not see it, but I know what they're doing. I mean, to give folks a little bit of an idea, if a magician is holding a deck in front of you and they're riffling with their thumb and they say, tell me when to stop, and they're going, and you tell them when to stop, they're counting the cards with their thumb. You say stop and they take the top half off, they know there's exactly 18 cards in that top half, because they can count as they riffle it. With a great magician, you can take a deck, split it, put one half in each hand, and based on the weight, they can tell you how many cards are in each hand really accurately. When you know some of this stuff, right, and you know a whole variety of ways of forcing a card, and the extraordinary range of shuffles that are available, so that a magician can shuffle a deck and still know where every single card is in the deck. It's a combination of maths and skill. So when the founder has become so familiar with, I get it, I get them, I've got it, and I've got them, it stops being magical. And so your thing isn't special to you anymore, right? And you've probably forgotten the ache. You've probably forgot what that ache felt like. And so the one thing I would say to people is, the ache is the hardest thing for us to find. It's interesting. The ache is the thing when we're working with companies, and that's whether we're working with a company that designs and manufactures components for submarine construction, or we're working with a solopreneur advisory type business. when we build the models, the thing that people have the greatest difficulty finding their way back to is the ache. It's really, really very interesting.
So Simon, if we get to wrap up, unfortunately, we could talk forever, and I'm enjoying so much hearing all the different perspectives and thoughts. What is the one thing you would want someone to hear from you or take away from this before we wrap up?
Well, apart from the fact that business should be, one of the most powerful forces we've got on the planet. And I think we can lose sight of that a little bit. I grew up in these very small country towns. If I went and got some milk at the corner store, at Hill's corner store for mum, at 10 years of age, Mr. Hill would give me some lollies for being such a good young lad and coming down and getting the milk for mum. I never gave him money for the milk. I don't know how the milk got paid for. I'm assuming mum had an account and once a month she went and paid for it. I don't know, Mum would say, on the way home from school, drop into the clothing store. You need some new jeans and some shirts and get some clothes and bring them home on APRO, bring them home on approval. And I'd go in and to Cad Brothers and Brian Cad, the owner, would pull out some shirts and some jeans and hold them up to me and go, right, Simon, take them home. And I'd take them home and I'd try them all on in front of mum and she'd say, we're keeping those and those two, take the rest back tomorrow. And I'd shove them in my school bag and the next day I'd take them back to Cad's and he'd take the ones that we didn't buy and put them back on the shelves, which I guess means they had to iron them and everything. And they'd charge us for the ones we kept. That was country town business, right? And if the corner store, the little grocery store closes down or the petrol station closes down, the town dies. It's actually just that simple. And so business is the cornerstone of community, and it still is. And business should be the most powerful force for good on the planet. So, the one thing I would want people to take away is to recognize that the purpose of what you do really, really matters. But the most important thing about what you do is the thinking behind it, the depth of thinking that you put into how you solve the customer's ache, and the effort and energy that you put into solving the customer's ache. Don't shortchange the customer with the endeavor of effort-free money. Everybody wants to print effort-free cash, the turnkey business, like the founder walks away and it just spits out cash. The founder might walk away at some point, but be aware as you do, the founder influence immediately starts to dilute.
Yeah.
And the sales team that's 2 generations past the founder are no longer selling what the founder set out to solve, which means they might not be selling a solution to the ache. I mean, is Apple going to be the same company once Tim Cook has left? Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak are long gone. Tim Cook was the closest one to them when he's gone, and now we're to the 3rd and 4th generation. Are they going to be the same company? And I'm not sure that they are. I think they're already changing, right? So, and you might, as the founder, hopefully you do as the founder, have a business that you've built that allows you to step back and earn and reap the benefits of it. But all your energy and effort went in to taking the risk in the first place. Effort isn't always labor and time. A big part of the founder effort is you took the risks, and people who have never been in business choose not to see that side of it. But the founder took the risk. Everyone wants businesses to pay for everything, but no one wants to take the risk that business owners take. And so you get paid for that later, but don't shortchange the market. Don't think, I can build a product in 3 hours using AI and make a ton of cash off it. It's worth what its value is determined by the depth of thinking, the risk taken to bring to market, and then the ongoing quality of thinking that sits behind it. Your real product is your thinking.
Yeah,
that would
I feel like I needed this episode for me, so I'm selfishly thankful that you're here. Simon, how can people find you if they want to connect with you, whether on social media or website?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. There is actually a QR code on the screen that gets to my LinkedIn profile, but our website is modelsmethod.com. They can find me on that. My email is simon@modelsmethod.com. I'm really happy for people to email me. They should mention your podcast so that we know where they came from if they just email me out of the blue. But I like to chat to people and things. So simon@modelsmethod.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn using the QR code. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. or modelsmethod.com. There's a couple of interesting tools, a lot of video content on there. There's a whole page about the Genius model, plenty of stuff to find.
Amazing. And we'll link all the links in the show notes as well, so people can easily find it. Simon, thank you so much for your time, your insights, coming prepared with the whiteboard to share us visually. That was incredible. So appreciate your time and energy.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.